Greetings, everyone. A hearty welcome to you all. Thank you for joining me and Dale on this webinar on the science of yoga. Wow, the science of yoga. Now, I like to start off with saying one of my many favorite mantras, but this one is applicable to this particular module 3, which is all about the science of yoga. And my mantra is, yoga is as scientific as it is spiritual. Now, that sometimes makes some yogis kind of go, what? But it is, and we are grateful to yoga for being as scientific as it is. And what we are going to do here in this webinar is explore a little bit deeper into what some of the science is that we use in Yoga for Cancer. Now, I'm going to start off with, first of all, defining, okay, science of yoga. We know what yoga is. So to define yoga is, I'm going to make it as simple as saying it is breath and movement. And then I want to focus a little bit to start with on what is the science of science? What is science? What does it mean, science? Well, a good dictionary definition of that is that it is the study of the nature and behavior of things. It is the study, a body of knowledge about the nature and the behavior of things. And that can be, anything from the science of oceanography. How does the ocean, what is its nature and how does it behave? And what we are stealing from in the Yoga for Cancer science of yoga, we're going to steal from the science of physics, the science of physiology, a little bit from the science of psychology, and also from the science of scientific research. As research is in itself, gives us a body of knowledge about the behavior of things. That's what research does. It gives us evidence of the behavior of things, which is really important to this particular methodology. Now, I'm going to have to apologize. There is a little bit from the science of biology and a little bit from the science of anatomy, of which we are, and I say a little bit because we are making an assumption here that all of you are more than familiar with the science of anatomy as yogis and as yoga teachers and anyone who might be in the healthcare professions. But what I want to do is steal some principles from these other sciences, physics in particular, physiology, how the body moves, psychology, and we're going to put those things together in what is the content of Module 3. What we're going to do is study and understand and steal from these behavioral theories of these particular 3 sciences, and we are going to apply them in ways that are going to help cancer patients and survivors deal more effectively with the treatments, the after effects of their cancer treatments. And ultimately, we're going to use the science of yoga to find balance and homeostasis in these individuals' lives. Now, what are the principles that I am stealing? I just mentioned some pretty big bodies of knowledge: physics, physiology, and psychology. And I'm only going to steal 5 principles from those huge bodies of knowledge. The first one is gravity. The second principle is movement, how things move, not just our bodies, but things in nature. The third one is the principle of compression and restriction. I put them together and we'll understand a little bit more why. And the fourth one is resistance. What is resistance? We'll explore that a little bit and even demonstrate part of it. And then finally, the fifth one, which is the principle of the relaxation response. So let's get started. I'm going to start with, even though it's probably, it is definitely not the first one I mentioned. The first one I mentioned was gravity, which is, as we all know in doing yoga, how important gravity is to everything, whether it's breathing or movement or inversions. That we use gravity fundamentally, profoundly in our yoga practice. But I'm going to start with movement. Movement is what we as Yoga for Cancer teachers are wanting to do for our students, is to get them to move. That is our objective. And that is because with movement, we are going to allow them to find ways to better function naturally. It's a natural way to keep their body unfriendly to cancer. That's our job, but it's also the job of a cancer patient and survivor to move their body. Even the American Cancer Society reminds us that there are certain levels of movement that we should be doing on a daily basis, or rather, more they calculate it on a weekly basis. But in any case, more than 40% of cancer patients and survivors are not reaching that minimum. And so part of our objective here is to move the body. So there you go. What in the body moves? There are so many things in the body that moves. First of all, muscles, there's movement. Muscles move bones. There's another movement. That's how we move our books around. And that's how we walk across the street. We also have movement of breath in our body, fundamental to yoga, as I defined it, breath and movement. We also move fluids in our body, the fluids of the lymphatic fluid. We talked about that a lot in the science of cancer. And we also are always moving our blood. That has to be pumping all the time. So that's movement in our body. Another movement is, and one we are, not so focused on as movement, but it is. And that is all the ways our body uses movement for elimination of the things that we don't need anymore, or the things that we do need, like the movement of food from our mouth down to our gut. That's movement. So I just want to remind everyone too that there's another thing that moves through our body, and that's thoughts through our mind. That's another form of movement. In any case, lots of things move in our body. And I just want to point out one thing about movement before I pass the ball to Dale, who is a movement professional, by the way. I'm going to say that there are basically two kinds of movement. There is voluntary movement, which is we voluntarily decide to get up and walk upstairs or across the street or move in our yoga class. And then there's involuntary movement. And there are a lot of things in our body, the way our body behaves, that are involuntary. And we'll get back to this when we talk about other principles, such as the relaxation response, how involuntary movement applies there. But for right now, let me just toss the ball over to Dale, who is going to give us a closer look at muscle movement.
Yeah. Let's talk about, generally talk about the musculoskeletal system. And we use this system a lot in yoga, especially in our asana practice. And so it will be helpful as we go through learning about the science of yoga to clarify some language and clarify some definitions for ourselves. So to do that, we'll start with voluntary movement of our bodies through space. And then maybe in just a little bit, I'll have Tari demonstrate a little bit. So let's define muscle movement versus joint movement. And as yoga teachers or as any type of movement teacher, generally we're asking people to move their bones through space or to move their bodies to create specific shapes or specific sequences. And how does that actually happen? So again, this is pretty general. And maybe at the end, Tari, you and I can throw out some of our book references if anyone wants to continue to dig into this. I know you have a stack and I have a stack. So muscles move our bones. The only way that we propel ourselves through space is through muscle movement. And a muscle attaches at one point in the body on one bone, crosses a joint, and then connects to another bone. And because the muscle crosses a joint, it's able to move that joint. And that joint can move forward, back, up, down, and that's how we move throughout our days. So when we talk about muscle movement, we need to use the words contraction and, for our purposes, relaxation. Muscles contract and they change their tension and their quality. And then they can, for our purposes, relax and again, change that tension or quality. Now, if Tari and I were just to sit up nice and tall and you can follow along, and we don't move our joints or move through space, we could still tense up some parts of our muscles. So we could bring tension into our abdominal muscles. And we do that all the time, right? When we're like, sit up nice and tall, draw the belly in and up. That's language we're used to. Or as Tari's sitting nice and tall, without even moving her arms, I could say, draw your arm muscles up onto the arm bone, or bring some strength into the arms. What am I asking her to do? That's called an isometric movement. It means that I'm asking Tari to bring tension into her muscle, but the length of her muscle is not going to change. So yeah, so Tari's arms are out wide. That's like a warrior two. And you know how in warrior two, we want those arm muscles to be strong. So I would be asking Tari as her teacher to tense up her muscles isometrically without moving her joints. That's isometric movement. You can relax your arms, Tari. I'm gonna just start moving Tari's arms around everywhere. So yeah, like that. No, I'm just, yeah. All right, so if I were to ask Tari to bend her right elbow, yeah, I just asked her to move her arm. And that meant that she had to contract her bicep muscle. That's called a concentric contraction. And now from a bent elbow, Tari, if I ask you to extend your arm out to the side, what I'm actually asking her to do is to concentrically contract her tricep muscle. So the muscles work in conjunction with each other. When she flexes her elbow and contracts the bicep, her tricep muscles are actually working in resistance to that movement. They have to relax a little bit, but they're eccentrically contracting. They're resisting the movement as the bicep is doing most of the work. And then when I say, and now Tari, extend your arm out to the side, that means that her triceps are concentrically contracting and the biceps are doing the work of eccentrically contracting to resist the movement. And they do that because if I say, okay, Tari, extend your arm out, and the biceps just let go, her arm would just fly off into space. So our muscles work in conjunction together. So before I keep making Tari move this and that and everywhere else, I want to, Yeah, do the other arm now. I want to give a little picture as Tari works on her other arm. A little image I was able to find. And that looks pretty good on my end. Tari, can you see that okay?
Yes, perfect.
So this is what I just had Tari do. You can see here on the left, the bicep muscles are contracting. That's a concentric contraction. And then the triceps, they're extending perhaps or relaxing. It's a verb, but they're resisting that movement. And then in the opposite direction, when the biceps want to lengthen out or relax, the triceps are doing the concentric contraction there. And I'll also share this really great image of the pec muscle. This is just such a great image. You see here how, and as I'm showing you, Tari's doing a little cactus clap with her arms, but the pec muscle is, it originates on the sternum. You see how it's connected there. And then it goes all the way over and inserts on the upper arm bone. If the pec muscle just attached to the rib cage or just attached to the sternum, your arm couldn't move. So our muscles have to cross a joint or they cross to another bone to then help move that arm. I just love that image. It's so clear. Of course, this is a simplification, right? We have tons of muscles that move our arms. I'll just scroll back up to the bicep and tricep so you can see that again. So see how the bicep, it's connecting to the shoulder joint, over the shoulder joint and coming all the way down to the lower arm bones. Triceps doing the same, just towards the back body. So they insert or they originate at the shoulder joint in the back, and then they cross a joint, crossing the elbow, and then they insert at the lower arm bones. Yeah. Let's see, what was my other, oh, I don't want to get to the spine yet. Okay. So as I'm talking about muscle movement, I'm also using other language like flexion and extension. So this is where we need to be specific as movement professionals or as yoga teachers, because sometimes we'll say, flex your muscles or like look really strong, and that can be kind of silly. But really we can't flex a muscle and extend a muscle because we know that muscles contract and relax, or they contract in different ways. But a joint is what we're flexing and extending. So again, if I ask Tari to, for this purpose, just reach your arms out directly side. Now flex your elbow joints, which will bend the good arms, and now extend the elbow joints. Yeah, good. Now bring your arms down at your sides. And just quickly here for our purposes, and if anyone out there is an anatomy buff or should be more of a review. But if I ask Tari to reach her arms out to the side and up, that's called abduction. And when she brings her arms down, that's called adduction. And of course, the shoulder joint is a ball and socket joint. So Tari, if your arms are out to the side, can you rotate your palms up and rotate the upper arm bone and then rotate them down? Yeah, so we can do so much with a ball and socket joint. We can rotate up and down. Good, and you can relax your arms. Of course, we have the lower arm bones as well that cross each other, that allows for the rotation. So we have flexion, extension, rotation for our joints. And that language is really important, especially as we go into talking about the spine, which Tari and I can go into like a 5-hour-long conversation on the spine. So we're going to try not to do that because we want to keep going and do a bunch of other things as well. Let's see. Yes. Contraction, relaxation, flexion, extension, rotation. I'm going to stop myself there because I know we want to get into the spine and this conversation about what the spine is doing. Is it flexing, extending? Why do we move the spine in all 5 directions? That's where we're going next. So, yeah.
So yes, the spine and how it moves. is, because we're talking about movement here, how things move. What is the nature of the spine and how does it behave? And what the other aspect of the spine is that it is what I refer to in a lot of our materials as the highway of our body. As I can move my arms and I can move my legs. If I didn't have arms and legs, I would, and I still had my spine, I would be held together. And that is where I found this really great picture that Dale is going to put up there for you to see, that this is where it comes down to the center of our the center of our work. As we get closer to studying the methodology of yoga for cancer, is that we're focused a large degree on that spine, because it is the highway. Not only does it hold us together, everything else would fall apart if that spine was not there. And not only is it the highway of getting nourishment to all of the cells of our body, it is major highway for our nervous system. And as we have already studied about how the lymph system works in relationship to the spine, and how important that is, what we're going to do is focus on the 5 ways that the spine moves. There are only 5 ways that it behaves. And we'll focus on that and look at the intricacies of those 5 movements. So the first movement is what I call, and it refers back to what Dale was mentioning in terms of the language that we use about muscle movement. We can elongate the spine. That's one way that it moves. And the principle to that is breathing. When we breathe in, we create the ability for the spine to slightly elongate. It certainly, the in-breath allows us to extend the spine up. Are we extending the spine up, Dale, when we breathe in? When we are moving it, finding our alignment of the spine's vertebrae, we call that elongation.
Yeah, we like, well, I like elongate, or sometimes I'll say lengthen, but the anatomical term is axial extension. So if you can think of the axis line, or your plumb line, if anyone's familiar with that terminology, you're not moving the spine in any other direction, but you're lengthening. So axial extension. Lifting and creating a little bit of space in between the vertebrae.
A little bit of space, and with the cues that are very familiar to us, lifting the crown of the head up and centering the sits bones into the ground, or extending your roots into the earth, moving in those 2 opposite directions, elongating the spine and finding spinal alignment. So that's the first way. Then there are a couple of other ways. The second way is one that I find, and it fits right into what Dale was talking about in terms of the relationship to muscles, and that is what we call a side bend. There are other words for it, but what I'm going to do is ask everyone if you wouldn't do this with me also, because you might be sitting there for quite a long time. I'm going to take and place my right hand firmly down on a block that's right here and lift my left arm up, elongating the spine first with an inhale, and then side bending over to the right. And what happens when I'm over here on the right? Well, I'm feeling the left muscles on my left side stretching, elongating, and my right side is, what is it doing? They're contracting. And then I'm going to come back up, and I'm going to bring my left hand down and I'm right arm straight up and I'm going to side bend to the opposite side. So inhaling, elongate first. So we always want to initiate these movements with an elongation. And then as I contract the muscles on the left side of my body, the right side of my body is stretching out, elongating, and reaching out of the right hip crease. Coming back to center. Okay, so now we have two ways of moving the spine. Even though I did both sides, that's what we do. We like to keep it balanced. After all, that's what homeostasis is all about, keeping it balanced. So if we consider now the spine can move, what's its nature, what's its behavior? It elongates and it bends. It bends from side to side. Okay, now the next movement I am going to do is what the spine does and does very well is it twists. But a twist is a little bit of a complicated movement. And sometimes we get a little distracted in yoga thinking if we're twisting, we're really just doing twisting our shoulders over and our head over to the right side. That's only half a twist, okay? Also, a twist is something that we have also married with detoxification, which we will talk about later. But right now, I want to talk about what is a twist. And a twist is not just taking my head and my shoulders and turning it to the right or the left. The twist is about moving and twisting like you would take a washcloth, a wash rag, and squeeze out, twist your washcloth, all the water out of your washcloth. You would be doing it in two directions, not just one direction. So this hand is going forward, this hand is going back. And what we're focused on, where the twist happens, is not in the shoulders, and it's not in a twist when we're doing a supine twist and twisting the hips. The twist happens, see my little guy here, he, along with the cat joining me today. The twist happens here. See, we have two sections of the body. We have the shoulders and we have the hips. And then we have this big space in between here that is not connected to anything. And what happens in there? What is in there? That's where all our abdominal organs are. And so what we're doing is that we're wringing out the wash rag by twisting our shoulders in one direction and twisting our hips in the opposite direction. Now, he's not going to do that because he's not very flexible. But let's us do that as we sit on wherever you are seated. And I'm going to start with one twist by taking my right hand and placing it on my left thigh. Okay, I'm going to start a twist from the lower half of my body. So I'm going to twist his hips first of all. And I'm going to take that left thigh with my right hand and sort of pull it over in the direction of my right elbow, okay? And at the same time, I'm going to bring my left arm up and twist my shoulders to the right side. So as my hips are going left, my shoulders are going right. And if I started around a nice elongated spine, I'm creating a wash rag effect, a squeezing effect right here in my abdominal area. This area right in here. That's what a twist should be doing. It should be twisting in that middle area of your body. Okay, so let's do the other side. So I'm going to take my left hand now and put it on my right thigh. And my right arm up towards the ceiling. I'm going to first start with a little bit of pull of that right thigh over to the left, elongating my spine. And then as I twist and exhale, I'm going to bring that right arm behind me and twist over to the right. So my shoulder girdle is going in one direction and my hip girdle, my hips are going in the opposite direction. And that is what is creating the twist in our abdominal area. And of course, we started all of that in and around a nice elongation of the spine and then twisting one way. Inhale, elongating the spine, and twisting to the opposite direction. Okay, so how many ways we have now? Elongation, side bend, and twisting. So what are those other two? I said there were 5. What are the other 2 ways the spine moves? How does the spine behave? Well, the spine behaves in 2 other ways. And I'm going to take a drink and toss that ball over to Dale.
Sure. I'm going to pull up some pictures as you're taking a drink so that I can use them. I just love this picture. Did anyone out there notice that there are 2 sacrums in this picture? One is attached to the spine because the sacrum is part of the spine, and the other one is still attached to the pelvis. The 2 halves of the pelvis are connected by the sacrum. I didn't know if maybe anyone caught that. Anyway. So we just worked on a few things with Tari sitting up. Let's first look at these yellow vertebrae, this illustration here. We did some side bending. Now, if you can see here, when we side bend to the left, do you see that the space, and we're looking forward. So if we were looking at somebody's spine, this is the frontal view. And if you were to side bend to the left, did you notice here how the left side of the vertebrae is shortened and the right side is more open? And then when you side bend to the other way, the right side, then the left side is going to be short and the right side's open. So you can kind of see that you're changing the shape of the vertebrae and the angle of the vertebrae in there. Now we're going to go into flexion and extension, or we sometimes call it forward rounding and backward rounding, or sometimes we say arcing the spine. We're going to get into language in a minute. So let's look at these like sort of more natural looking vertebrae. Now we're looking at the side, if someone was standing to the side. If someone were to flex, and remember that joints flex, flexion means that you're decreasing the joint angle. So that would be the front of the joint here. Do you see how the front of the vertebrae are more narrow and the back is more open? To extend is to increase the angle of the joint. So the front of the vertebrae are now more open and the back is more narrow. Okay, so let's see Tari put that onto her body. So Tari, can you start, would you like to start seated? Let's start seated, just as you are. Tari's in her favorite pose, hero's pose. Just a personal favorite, right?
I can do this if you prefer.
Oh, okay, either one. Okay, well, either one, because right now Tari is sitting with a neutral spine. She's sitting up nice and tall, and her pelvis is able to be rooted down into the floor. Now, if Tari was sitting and her pelvis was tucked and she didn't have the flexibility, I would see her spine rounding. So I would say, oh, Tari, I think you could use a bolster to sit up on, or, you know, something like that. And I could tell her, oh, maybe grab your blanket and slide the blanket under your seat. And that might help a person who might have a little bit of tightness and rounding forward. So that's why we like to support the seat. So here she is, nice and tall. And even here, I can ask her to inhale and elongate her spine, axial extension. And now as you exhale, keep that length in your spine. Yeah. Now I could say, Tari, as you inhale this time, lift the heart up and begin to open the chest and feel the shoulder blades slide towards each other on the back. Now, as you exhale, softly round the spine and soften the chest a little bit. Yeah, good. All right, now I'm gonna pause and say, Tari, can you come into extension and come into that open chest towards the ceiling, that back bend? So this is what we call a back bend. And can you all see that the shape of her spine is in this beautiful arc position, and she's supporting her neck. She's not gonna let her cervical spine completely extend back. That would be crunchy on the vertebrae, delicate part of the spine. And so this is extension. And I always remember extension because you're opening, right? Now, if you can please move into spinal flexion, this will round the spine. And I say round because can you see the shape that her spine is now making? It's slightly rounded, and we can work to draw the belly in a bit for a little bit of abdominal support, a lot of abdominal support, but that's what they're meant for. So the front body muscles have to contract in order to round the spine. So I can move her through cat and cow in this way. I can inhale into cow spine, extend, and exhale to round. Let's go into a hands and knees, Tari, and show cat and cow. So here we have also a really supported place where the knees are underneath the hips and the hands underneath the shoulders. And this lets me know when I've set up my student this way, Tari's very safe and very well supported. Start from a neutral spine here. Good. Now, we know that the spine starts at the base of the skull and it ends at the tailbone, right? So she can stay here and lengthen the spine without really changing the shape of her body, and that's still axial extension. Yeah. And then on an inhale, I'll tell her to extend more and open the chest, and the belly will maybe drop down a little bit. This is cow spine. And see all that space that Tari is keeping for her neck. Now, on your exhale, draw the belly in a bit and round the spine. And now, there's a little bit more ability for the pelvis to be more involved here because she's not sitting on her pelvis. Now inhale and open into cow. This is extension. And exhale and round into flexion. Yeah, good. And Tari, you can rest. You can rest and come to sit. So we just showed two examples, sitting and also on hands and knees, where we're moving the spine into flexion and extension. Or we sometimes say forward rounding and arcing. Now, there's a bit of a difference in the way that we speak language-wise to communicate and elicit a certain type of response in our students and anatomically what's happening. So it's really important to understand, because when we start to put together what's actually happening in the body scientifically with what the body is going through with cancer treatments, we can really understand how both cancer treatments and yoga affect the body and what we might want to use to help to support somebody. Tari, do you want to go into forward folding yet, or would you like to go somewhere else before we do that?
Well, I think that why don't we just, yeah, I should move my blankets, but I will move them back. Why don't we talk about forward folding, forward bending,
okay.
Because that is also a really important point to be made that connects to what you have so well explained, Dale.
Okay, and Josie is telling me that we have 20 minutes, so we're already very behind. But I'm going to keep going because to understand a forward fold versus a forward bend is going to lead us into our conversation about lymphatic system support and about breathing and about other types of movement and the other elements of movement that we're going to explore in the science of yoga. So Tari is still seated here in staff pose and her legs to the front. Now, if I just say inhale and then exhale, fold over, and I just don't give any direct, yeah, she's going to try to maybe bring her nose down to her thighs, because isn't that the point? We have to get there. No, that's not the point. Okay, come on up. Now, in this methodology, we always say heart in front of nose. And what are we talking about? Well, if you bring your hands together in front of your heart and then slowly lift your fingertips up towards the ceiling, do you notice how she doesn't touch her nose when that happens? However, if she's collapsed her neck and her cervical spine and rounds and tries to do that, she's going to end up poking her nose or picking her nose. Yeah. So we say heart in front of the nose because that's going to protect the spine and it's going to enable proper breathing, and we'll get into the diaphragm in just a bit. So if I want Tari to fold forward, I'm going to ask her to not flex from her spine, which would be the rounding and dropping the head. I want to do that only with cat and cow or with some dynamic movement. When I want her to fold forward, instead I'm going to ask her to flex at her hip. And when she flexes at her hip, do you see how she can keep her spine pretty long? And now she can go, let's bring your hands to the thighs or the shins. And now she can be very supportive here. And she's still getting a lot of great lengthening over behind the back body, backs of the legs, hamstrings in the back. But she's not compromising her spine. And I feel very comfortable as her teacher. I'm looking at her alignment. I can keep her here for a few breaths. And of course, I'm always saying inhale and find that length. Exhale, good, really good. And now slowly walk your hands up the thighs and return to sitting up nice and tall. Good. Could you come to stand, Tari? Now, if she were to stand, and I know she's a little cut off, and could you do like a traditional forward fold in our yoga practices? I think it'll be fine. I can see you enough. So if you just exhale, fold forward. Boom. Yeah, good. So do you all see the shape of her spine? It's pretty rounded, but and there's still space between her chest and the thighs. Okay, yeah. Now roll on up. Now that's considered Uttanasana, or forward bending or forward folding. Now to bend is to flex, and you have to put that into your brain. To bend is to flex. So Tari was flexing her spine just then and rounding because she went as far as her flexibility allowed in her hips. And then when she can no longer move forward with a nice elongated spine, eventually her spine will give into gravity because we're always in relationship with gravity, and it will round. Do you see how that works? So gravity's pulling her head down and she's folded forward. Now this does place a lot of heavy pressure on the vertebrae of the spine, and the head is very, very heavy. And if anyone's going through cancer treatments, their vertebrae are going to be really impacted by that. Tari, is it really easy to take a diaphragmatic breath down there?
Couldn't breathe at all.
Yeah, so it's also very hard to breathe in that position. So in this methodology, we come into what we call a forward fold, and it keeps the heart lifted. Do you have blocks there, Tari?
I do.
Okay. Okay, so can you place your blocks in front of you and stand? Well, maybe bring them a little closer because you'll need the feet in between the blocks. And you'll get into this in module 4, but I would like Tari to keep her heart lifted in front of her nose, and I would like to keep the spine nice and long. So from your mountain pose, standing tall, relax your arms at your sides. And now inhale and reach those arms up. And as you reach the arms up, you're elongating the spine. Good. Now exhale and bend your knees and bring your hands to your blocks. And now you're folded forward from your hip. Good. But your heart is still lifted and you're not rounding in the back, and you're very safe. And I can take you into all sorts of poses from here. I can have you do a lunge, or I could have you, yeah. So come up to stand, and good. I won't go too far because then I'll get too into what's coming up, hint, hint, in module 4. But I just was able to take her through a sequence while protecting her spine. And hopefully showing the difference between the rounding or the bending, which is a flexion action, and keeping the spine elongated and hinging from the hip instead, flexion from the hip. I'm going way over time, Tari. I'm sorry about that.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're still talking about movement. What else moves in the body? Well, the one really big thing that moves, we define yoga as moving and breathing. Breath moves through the body. Breathing is taking gas in and out of our lungs. It's the gas that moves in and out with the help of a whole lot of muscles. Um, and that's where I want to really get into. We have some really great images to show you about how those gases, the gas of the air around us, hopefully nice and pure, is coming into filling up the empty lungs. And that is done with several different muscles, but the most important one, the main muscle that brings gas into our lungs, is the diaphragm. So what we want to do is talk a little bit about the diaphragm. Where is it? What does it look like? And how does it work? It is this dome-shaped muscle. And like Dale's saying, a muscle is connected to bone. And the muscle of the diaphragm is more like a circular muscle that is connected to the rib cage. And it is doesn't just follow along one rib bone. It connects to all of them in sort of like a big disc in the middle of your body, right there in the diaphragm. It's just under the rib cage in the middle of your body. And we're going to probably come back to this image, but what we're going to do is connect the breathing process of how that diaphragm works with thinking of it as the iris of your eye. When we see the domed diaphragm muscle here, it has a nice little arc. When we breathe in, it is going to engage and become shorter. And it's like the closing of the iris of the eye. It becomes shorter, and it actually slightly moves down as it becomes shorter, tightens up like the iris of the eye, and draws gases into the lungs above it. So when we breathe in, the diaphragm contracts. And when we breathe out, it relaxes and goes back to its dome shape. So Dale, I think you have a really interesting image there, don't you? Let's just, show this very short little video. It's an eye-opener to actually see how the diaphragm is working. Often we have some misconceptions that the diaphragm itself is expanding, and it's getting longer when we breathe in. No, it's contracting inward. It's reducing its length. And then when it breathes out, so when it goes up, and you see that movement upward to its dome shape, to its resting shape, that's on an out breath. That's the out breath. Here's the in breath.
You change. So yeah, I can't help but breathe along with this. So
I know, me too. So there's the out breath. There's the in breath. There's the out breath.
Yeah, you can really, really feel it. And there's check out this angle here. This is like from the bottom up. And now in Tara, you can talk about, we have other images of the thoracic duct and the vagus nerve, but you see here the little holes in the diaphragm, and you see the space between the diaphragm and the vertebrae. That's so important. I just love that video so much.
So we're going to move into the other aspect of movement. We're still talking about movement. We haven't talked about gravity yet, a little bit here and there, but the movement of that diaphragm in that location. So the very first image that you showed of the diaphragm also shows where, when we studied the lymphatic system in the science of cancer, we talked about the thoracic duct. And this first image shows where it is in relationship to the diaphragm. So maybe, is it Josie who's running the, or is that you, Dale? Who
I have it. Do you want me to
run the little cursor?
This is the, well, we've got the diaphragm picture here.
Right. That's the diaphragm picture. No, not the one. No, don't go down.
Not that one.
Not that one. The one that you were on. That's all about.
So you like this one?
You want to stay right there. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I was saying take your cursor
Oh,
and
this
show where the thoracic duct is.
right here. Sorry. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So every time that diaphragm contracts as you take an inhale, and then every time you exhale, it relaxes and moves up. It moves up towards your heart. That's the exhale. And it's going to be really important to understand that now as the nature of how the diaphragm works, how it behaves, and how it behaves on the structure of other systems, not symptoms, systems in the body, in order to not only produce lymphatic drainage, but what we're going to get to in the last one of our principles is how it also participates in igniting the relaxation response. So that's how we move lymph through our body, by breathing. And it strokes up and down that lymph, up and down the spine. It moves up and down the spine where that thoracic duct lives. And if we have that spine held upright and well elongated and not folded over or bent over so that we cannot breathe, if we are folded over and in spinal flexion forward, we cannot breathe and let that thoracic duct be stroked by the diaphragm. So that's why it's so important. Now let's talk a little bit now, move into the other, briefly, the other kinds of movement that I mentioned. All of this movement that we've been doing now with the diaphragm, with our arms, our legs, requires what other kind of movement? It requires cardiovascular movement. The muscles there in the heart, we're probably all a little bit more familiar with, but as the heart pumps, that muscle movement is both, it's involuntary. We can engage it more by going out for a jog. Then we make that involuntary movement accelerated. But for the most part, our heart is there pumping all the time. And then also we have other muscles that move for elimination, and all of these things are really important to keeping the homeostasis of our body going. So that's movement. Really, really important part of really first principle. We spent all this time talking about one principle. Now we're going to talk about compression and restriction. And restriction means just that, restriction of movement. And as a scientific theory, it can deliver some really powerful benefits to the body. And because it is restriction and compression are both a directional quality to movement. It is directed inward. That's what restriction and compression does. It goes more central to the center of the body to help us maintain, as we do often in yoga, to maintain a static pose. So we put ourselves into an eagle pose, and then we hold it. We're moving inward, inward, inward in our eagle arms, our eagle legs. We're moving inward, and that is an example of not only are we restricting movement, but we're compressing inward. And oftentimes that compression can sort of modify the flow of blood and lymph, which has gotten confused. I think it's confusing to that this process in itself is how yoga detoxifies. Well, let's say that yoga doesn't detoxify the body. Yoga is going to help the body systems that are already designed and are in there detoxing for us all the time. We use our yoga practice. We use the principle of compression, which originated with Mr. Iyengar, of the squeeze and soak. Now, it's not the squeeze and soak that itself detoxifies. It's the squeeze and soaking in and around the abdominal organs that helps them, the pancreas, the kidneys, that helps those organs that are designed to detoxify to work better. It helps draw more blood to it. It helps to drain more lymph from them and through the lymph nodes that do surround those organs. So squeeze and soak is a really, really important second principle. It involves restriction and compression. Yeah, I think the intention of moving inward. And so then the third principle that we want to talk about, and I think actually I'm going to take, instead of making sun salutations to the sun, I'm going to do sun salutations to what is probably the most important physics principle that affects our lives every single second of the day and night. And that is gravity. How we have learned to both adapt to it, taking gravity to become stronger, and also given into it, where gravity takes over our bodies as we age and brings on problems. So we borrow this principle of gravity directly from physics. And it is a biological function. It is a function in nature that is with us all the time and in the aging process. The best example of all this is to talk about what happens with the lack of gravity. What would happen to us if we didn't have gravity? Well, we probably wouldn't lose length in our spine as we get older. But what is a known fact is what does happen to astronauts when they have been out in outer space without gravity for an extended period of time. Even though they try to recreate that, or not recreate, they try to create the sensation of gravity. And when they are there for an extended period of time, their bones begin to shrink and soften. Their muscles certainly reduce because they do not have gravity to practice what is our fourth principle that we're going to talk about. They do not have the resistance of gravity to build bone and muscle. And so gravity is, it takes astronauts months and months to come back from space. And even it has been tested and known that it has not only a physical effect on the body in terms of bone and in terms of cardiovascular behavior in the body. It's also has apparently, it affects the thought process too of astronauts when they return and begin to experience the effects of gravity on what has been a brain that has not had that gravitational effect. So it's really fascinating, and we really must salute gravity as to part of what helps us keep healthy and strong. So that's principle number 3, and it leads us right into the fourth principle of our that we want to talk about, and how we use the principle of resistance in yoga practice all the time. As compression is moving inward and tightening and shrinking, resistance is what Dale was telling me to do with my spine, moving it as I was in a neutral spine, moving my spine in two opposite directions, moving my head forward and my tailbone behind me. I was moving, resisting, moving in opposite directions. And that is what we do in most of our yoga poses, is we find that way to move into the resistance of a force outside of ourselves. We are resisting into gravity all the time, every time we elongate the spine. And we are working into that resistance every time we take an exhale, and the diaphragm moves up towards gravity. There's a resistance there that helps us breathe better because we are moving into that gravitational force. But resistance is one of the other components that we use in all of our standing poses. It builds bone. It helps us build strong muscles. And it also allows for us to find a way to breathe more effectively and efficiently. So I don't know how I'm doing on time here. If I would have time to have a demonstration. Josie, what's my time looking like?
It's already 2 o'clock, so
Yeah.
I already advised everyone that we are definitely going over. So I would just keep on going, but just be mindful because this is all being recorded. So I've already seen a few people have to leave. So thank you very much for your hour, and I apologize that we're going over. But I think you should keep going, and people can patch in and watch the replay and fast forward to where they dropped off.
Okay, so I'm going to say if there is any, because I think that we do a pretty good job of explaining what resistance is and giving examples of it in the manual. And certainly if you have any questions about it, but I would like to give some time to move into the fifth principle because I think that it is really very important. And you know, there's things about it that there's new research and new questions that are coming up as we use the science of research to look at some of the behaviors that we are observing that our yoga practice does and that we perhaps don't understand quite as well. And that is research that's coming in and in around the nervous system, in and around understanding the vagus nerve. And this is when Dr. Benson defined the relaxation response back in the 1980s, we did not know a lot about the vagus nerve and how it worked. And certainly had not done experiments on it, and we know quite a bit more about it now. So I want to just focus on the idea of the relaxation response, and that starts with a foundation understanding of the nervous system as the autonomic nervous system in our body is comprised of more than one system. It's comprised of two very distinct systems. The involuntary nervous system, which is the autonomic nervous system, which can be affected by the things that we do in yoga. We're learning this, and it's very helpful to understanding the relaxation response. There are two nervous systems in our body. The sympathetic nervous system, which we hear a lot about in yoga. And the sympathetic nervous system is our fight or flight nervous system. And the fight or flight gets attributed to just about everything that causes stress. And it's not just the wild tiger out there or the truck coming down the highway, or even the other kinds of the dangers that stress our body. It's the everyday stress that causes this reaction of the sympathetic nervous system to elicit a response, to elicit a control over our immune system to respond to the kinds of stressors that we are feeling in our life. And it's the stress that puts us in, that causes the anxiety. Stress from the outside, whether it be a stressful day at the office, losing your job, or the stress of driving in a very heavy traffic, or the stress of dealing with a pandemic. All of these create stress on the nervous system, which gets translated into anxiety. And our immune system has a way of responding to that. What we have learned from the relaxation response is that we can take control of the sympathetic nervous system, and we can turn off all those little stressors by engaging what is called the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is accessed directly by the things that we do in yoga. So the idea of the relaxation response is to find a way to be in a supported yoga position where the outside world, all of our props, are holding the body in a comfortable place. So no work, no stressors, no muscles, no bones are being moved. And then instead of saying, now relax, because the first thing we want to do when somebody tells you to relax, and in fact, there is research on this, they put little sensors on people's body and then say, now relax, is that the body sends signals to the sympathetic nervous system to say, I'm tightening up, I'm not relaxing. What we do know, and what has been measured, is when we put the body in comfort, in a relaxation pose, in a restorative pose, and then focus on that diaphragmatic breathing, where the diaphragm is working to find that, we saw it in that video that Dale played, that when that diaphragm moves up, didn't you? I wanted to exhale and relax. And so what we're going to look at, just as we looked at how that diaphragm directly related to moving lymph through the thoracic duct, I'm going to look at where the parasympathetic nervous system is in the body. There's one of the images that Dale has there, which shows the parasympathetic nervous system. That's how it looks. It wanders back and forth through the body. That is the parasympathetic nerve, and it wanders and branches out through the body. And then the vagus nerve is the central nerve, which he's going to show in the parasympathetic nervous system. The vagus nerve is the nerve that is right there in that same area along the spine, right there in front of the spine, right there on top of the thoracic duct. And what if you then moved into the other slide, which shows where that diaphragm is. So as that diaphragm moves up and down with our breath, not only is that diaphragm allowing for the principle of movement to move lymph, it is also engaging the principle of the relaxation response by engaging that parasympathetic nervous system to do what we call rest and digest. And when it is engaged, that nervous system shuts down the fight or flight. It shuts down the sympathetic nervous system and allows for there to be complete and total relaxation. So have a sip of water, Tari. And Dale, anything you want to add to this?
No, I think I just want to reiterate how you will use this knowledge in the upcoming modules So we've gone through the science of cancer and we've gone through the science of yoga. And now it's time to pair those together in order to figure out what poses and practices are helpful and what might not be helpful in an oncology yoga class, in a yoga for cancer class. We're going to start asking you, in the program, we'll start asking you things like, what does this pose do? And you'll have to think back to the science of yoga. And then we'll ask, what if somebody's going through chemotherapy, or what if somebody has lymphedema from some of their cancer treatments and procedures? And you'll have to start to pair together some of the science of yoga to what you would recommend for your classes. And always remember that these principles, they come together and they're sequential. So we're in relationship with gravity consistently. We move our bodies, we move our minds, we move our breath and our body fluids. And because of gravity and movement, we need to resist, we can compress, we can do all of these different things, restrict, right? All of that becomes kind of this circle, this sort of package. So we hope that you can start putting the puzzle pieces together after this.
Very well stated. In anticipation of pulling together the methodology, we want to rest that methodology on the foundation of science, both the science of cancer and the science of yoga. And in the science of yoga, we have drawn from physics, we've drawn from physiology, we have drawn from biology, and we've drawn from psychology. But we also have drawn greatly with lots of evidence in talking about the things that we do and the things that we don't do in the methodology. We have drawn from research, which is a form of science in itself. I hope that we have covered the mechanics of movement thoroughly, and explained in other ways how yoga does work on a cellular level in the body, even when it is in stillness. But the main purpose of the science of yoga is that we help inform you so that you can then lead your students to a better way to move and use their body, to keep their immune system strong, and to protect themselves and decrease their risk of cancer. So let's leave it with these 5 fundamental principles. And I'm going to close any lecture part of this and ask if there are any questions, Josie, that you